Hello and welcome to episode 57 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm one of the co-founders here at ETR. As always, I am joined by fellow co-founder Evan Silva, and we are just 9 days away from the NFL draft. With that in mind, we wanted to bring in one of our favorite draftniks, one of the oldest friends of the show. This is a young man who Evan Silva literally pulled off of a kitchen table in North Carolina while we were at Rotoworld. He's since risen to on-air television fame. He loves to study the hip swivel, the hand sizes. It is, of course, Josh Norris of Rotoworld and NBC Sports. Josh, good to see you, buddy. How's it going?
Good to see you, Adam. Good to talk to you, Evan. Evan, should we run through the story of how you and I actually connected via Twitter? And that's how I ultimately ended up here about 9 years later.
Go take it away.
Well, so luckily for me, heading into the 2011 NFL draft, I was fortunate enough to be invited into the Rams war room for all 7 rounds of that draft. That was a lockout year. And, you know, during that time, because I was a senior in college, I'd picked up, you know, what I wanted to do and try to work in football. And I enjoyed Evan's off-the-wall opinions. And so he and I kind of struck up a rapport of just communicating via Twitter. And I was basically feeding him information inside of the Rams draft room of how their board stacked, who they were trying to target, so on and so forth. And maybe just
I got this kid faking bathroom breaks.
Yeah, it's so true.
The bathroom and text me who's next on the Rams board.
Evan, I wonder if I could pull it up on my phone right now and like read the exact text conversation that we were having at the time, because I think they were at pick like 13 or 14. And like the week before, the day before, you know, the Julio Jones trade with the Atlanta Falcons moving up for him happened. And like, they really wanted Julio. They thought they were going to leave with Corey Liuget, so on and so forth. But I just remember like having this info and being the source for Evan Silva inside of this draft room. And that's where the relationship started 9 years ago, Evan.
Yeah, we knew that they were taking Robert Quinn that year.
We did. And then that was also the draft.
And also, you remember the conversation about the tight ends.
Yes. Josh McDaniels, right? was their offensive coordinator that year. That was the first year that the draft was 3 days long. And you know, they had all these players up on the board, like Mikel LaShore, remember that name, that were way higher on their board heading into day 2. But that morning, the whole scouting group went in and watched Lance Kendricks. And if you remember the name, DJ Williams, who was this tight end out of Arkansas, I think went to the Packers, if I'm not mistaken. And Josh McDaniels wanted to bring that 2 tight end group that he went from Gronk and Aaron Hernandez to the Rams and make it Michael Hoho Manawanui and Lance Kendricks. And when they go up on the board in the second round, Bill Devaney, who's a GM, and Steve Spagnuolo just look at Josh McDaniels, who basically just like shakes his head, and they just bypass everyone up on the board to take Lance Kendricks because they think he is a receiving option in this tight end class.
It just goes to show that the notion of like drafting, you know, we're going to take the next guy on our board at every pick, like that doesn't happen. You know, and also this idea that, you know, that you can have like this, you know, incredible 2 tight end configuration with Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski. I mean, actual NFL coaches are just as susceptible as we are to plugging in, you know, Lance Kendricks and Michael Humwani into that same like 2 tight end configuration and you know, pretending like it's going to be the same.
I learned so much, Adam. I know I keep going on here, but that was also the class with Austin Pettis and was it Greg Salas? Was he the other wide receiver? I think
yes, out of Hawaii.
Might have taken that year.
Yeah.
And like they already had Danny Amendola, and like the process of picking I think it was in the 3rd round between Pettis and Salas was this entire conversation, and Salas was still on the board, so they took him in round 4. And then the biggest like mind melt that happened was on day 3 and I hate trashing that group because they gave me so many great opportunities, but they just had zero process for figuring out who they were going to take in round 6 and round 7. They basically invited all the assistant coaches in who had worked out these late round prospects. and said, hey, we haven't picked anyone from your region. Who do you like? And they just pointed at someone on the board, and that's who they drafted in round 6 and round 7. Like, there was no process to trying to figure out, okay, this guy's a great athletic tester in this area, so we're going to take a shot here because in 2 years we might have more room on our depth chart, so on and so forth. So it was really eye-opening. I know it was just one of 32 groups, but the lack of process at the time was stunning. So.
A couple of things. Number one, for spilling the beans like this, you're going to get thrown out of the cocoon. I mean, Evan spent a lot of time talking about it. You're going to get just ejected from the cocoon for talking about this. Number two, when people say, oh, you guys don't know what you're talking about, you guys are just sitting on your couch. The guys in the scouting department, they have this insane process, like maybe they don't, like Josh is saying, like maybe they haven't thought about mathematically finding late round talent, stuff like that. They're just bringing assistants and saying, who's your favorite? Okay, cool. Let's fire it off. And then also, if you listen to the Andrew Brandt interview that I did at the end, he talked about the Aaron Rodgers pick and how the Aaron Rodgers pick came to be when they had Brett Favre. And to their credit, to Andrew Brandt's credit, they stuck with their board and said, we have Aaron Rodgers. We have Brett Favre. He's been the most durable player like in the history of sports. But Aaron Rodgers is on our board, by far the highest. We're going to stay there and we're going to take him. And despite all the turmoil that came with that, proved to be right. So yeah, I think it's different with different teams, but certainly some of the donkey teams, the bad teams that stay bad, like Evan likes to say, certainly don't have the process down for the draft.
And like none of the Packers higher ups really wanted Aaron Rodgers, and he wound up making them all filthy rich. Right.
They didn't want to. They didn't want to deal with the backlash from Favre and his agent. Nobody wanted to piss off Favre. Okay. Anyways, it's good to catch up with Josh about old times. However, as I said, we're 9 days away from the draft. Last week we hit quarterbacks and running backs with Pro Football Focus's Mike Renner. I encourage you guys to go back and listen to that. Today we are going to talk wide receivers mostly and a little bit of tight ends with Josh. Before we start talking about individual players, I wanted to zoom out for a second on this class. You often hear hyperbole and exaggeration in sports media. So when I first started hearing people calling this, the greatest wide receiver class in the history of the draft, I kind of shrugged it off, right? But after looking at athletic measurables of this class and kind of some of the unique production, I'm understanding why people are saying that to some degree. I'll start with Evan here. You have 7 wide receivers going in the first round of your mock. Is this the greatest wide receiver class you've ever studied? And if so, why?
Yeah, I think that from a prospect profile standpoint, it is. I think that it definitely has a chance to be just as good, if not better, than the 2014 class, which of course had, Mike Evans and Odell Beckham and, Allen Robinson win the second round. I think it's deeper. I think it's deeper than that 2014 class, because I think it goes like 8 deep with wide receivers that could potentially be picked in the first round. And I think that at a minimum, we'll see 5, and maybe the minimum should be 6. Brandon Ayuk is a guy that we'll talk about, and he's kind of like on that fringe. Like, he had this core muscle surgery, and I think that could take him out of the first round. But he had a lot of late first round buzz, and that's kind of where the fringe starts. We'll talk about Denzel Mems. I know that Josh loves Denzel Mems, as do I. And we'll talk about all the guys up at the top and talk about, who do we really think is the best and some sleepers along the way.
Josh, as someone who's been in the actual war room, as you just exposed, is this really the best class we've ever seen?
Well, Adam, I think it also goes back to that the NFL is starting to learn how to get the most out of these young wide receivers as well. They're not just asking them to go out there and master the route tree like they're Stephon Diggs as a rookie. You see plans in place for people like DK Metcalfe last year, who was asked to basically do exactly what he was doing at Ole Miss through the first 6 weeks of the season. Then you add little layers onto it. I think both of you guys can think back to what Deebo Samuel was at the beginning of last year. I'm not going to say he was like a manufactured touch player, but they wanted to get the ball in his hands early. And then you see the progression throughout his rookie season. This class has some of those types as well. Just extreme athletes who are fantastic with the ball in their hands. And the NFL is becoming, much better across the league generally at being able to figure out how to use those types and how they can be assets to your teams rather than focusing on the negatives of, incomplete route trees. So I think that only adds to the talent of this group as well.
Despite all this, and Evan mentioned the depth, despite this allegedly being the greatest wide receiver class of all time, we don't have even a consensus wide receiver 1, right? Like, we don't have a ridiculous home run prospect. Hey, correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like there's a Julio in here or a Calvin Johnson.
I think, Adam, if you take a couple of these wide receivers and put them in last year's class, they would have been the consensus number one.
Okay.
So I think that just speaks to, again, the talent at the top of this class. And if they were in other draft years, then they might be the consensus guy, if that makes sense.
Okay. So let's talk about the top tier here. I think both the Alabama guys, Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy, Oklahoma's CeeDee Lamb, I think on most people's board, those are the top three. Evan, is that how you have it? And I'm curious if who you think is the best NFL prospect out of that trio.
Yeah, that's how I have it. I like Jerry Jeudy the best. I think that CeeDee Lamb, from a production standpoint, he really, really stands out, and his run after catch really, really stands out. I mean, the dude in his career scored 32 receiving touchdowns in only 3 seasons, had a different quarterback every year, averaged 19 yards per reception. But I really prefer Jerry Jeudy. I mean, just the king of separation. It just stands out how good of a route runner. And I'm not even the best guy to be out here assessing route running ability. But I mean, you could just tell from Jerry Jeudy that this guy is a superb route runner just by the way that he moves. I mean, and Greg Cosell has compared him to like a cross between Antonio Brown and Odell Beckham. Zierlein has compared him to Santonio Holmes. He's a guy that, I mean, he's going to be able to get open in the NFL. I think that he's not a big contested catch winning wide receiver, but he's going to get open. He's going to stay open in the NFL. And I think that, just if you're looking for, if you really value separation, and I mean, I think that this guy has an ability to create separation at a level that, we have not seen from a wide receiver in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, Jerry Jeudy is the king, and that's why I have him as the number one receiver.
Evan, if I said that Calvin Ridley and Stephon Diggs were on the same spectrum of player,
yes,
would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah, but I think the difference.
And I would also have Antonio Brown and Odell Beckham on that spectrum, just at a higher level.
Because I think Jeudy belongs on that Calvin Ridley to Stephon Diggs spectrum. Now, I think there's a difference between Ridley and Diggs in that one can be like the primary pass catcher on an NFL team, or has shown it already. And I'm not sure if Ridley can do that yet. I think
that Jeudy is a better athlete than both of those guys.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think creating separation and sustaining it, translates to any offense. And that's basically what we're trying to do, is to evaluate for every offense in the NFL. And I mean, he worked outside, obviously. He worked in the slot as well with 49 slot receptions last year. This is a player whose, game travels. And that's not something you can say with just about everyone. But I also feel like I can talk about this with you guys. Did you guys look at or listen to that Star of David comment that he had at the combine? Like one of the more ridiculous things.
It's not just a comment. He had a full-on Star of David chain.
I mean, we have to take a moment to laugh at that. Just that, his friends, his teammates nicknamed him Jew. And so he embraced it by wearing a Star of David for no religious beliefs involved at all. Yeah. Like just one of the more crazy moments that I've witnessed in the last 7 or 8 years.
So good. Is he your wide receiver one, Josh?
He's not. I'm a big fan of CeeDee Lamb coming out of Oklahoma. They are the top 2 for me. I will say that. Lamb reminds me a lot of DeAndre Hopkins, and it's just that body control, that fluidity that he offers, that also, want to be the hammer, like to initiate all the contact, especially after the catch. I mean, he forced 26 missed tackles last year. That's second best among all of college football. Averaged 11 yards after the catch. That was 5th best in college football last season. And so while he's the hammer in terms of physicality, he also has just this unreal vision and fluidity during his routes after the catch. He's a player who, yes, at Oklahoma, they, set him up for success. Lincoln Riley is just a wizard of creating one-on-one isolated moments. But I don't know if you can, knock CeeDee Lamb for just being almost unstoppable in that type of an offense, Evan.
Yeah.
One thing to note about both these guys, neither guy is 21 yet.
Ooh.
So they're coming out of school early. You know, they're like freakish. They're exceptionally young. I mean, most players that come out of college are a good, 22 and a half, 23, sometimes even 24 coming out. Joe Burrow's 24, I believe. But these guys aren't even of legal drinking age yet, and their upside is sky high. So, but yeah, the third guy though is Henry Ruggs. What do you think about Henry Ruggs, Josh?
Yeah, I don't have him as the third. Henry Ruggs, entering the NFL, I think he will be best used as like rookie season Tyreek Hill, Adam Levitan. I don't know what emotions that stirs up in you.
I mean, look, anytime a guy comes out of college and he's under 190 pounds now and he's fast, people are immediately like, oh, he's Tyreek Hill. That's just like...
I'm not saying he is Tyreek Hill.
Right.
What I'm saying, he'll be used in a similar way.
Right.
In terms of just his ludicrous explosion. A player, even at Alabama, who they, manufactured touches for behind the line of scrimmage or got the ball in his hands early, or was just running past defenses. Like, we talk about advanced details in Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb that we just talked about. I'm not sure if Henry Ruggs is there, but if that game develops, because I think Tyreek has developed into like a true, real wide receiver in terms of creating separation with just the subtleties of movement and hips and footwork and breaks and all that kind of stuff. We haven't seen that from Ruggs, but I think the potential is there, obviously.
Yeah. Look, Henry Ruggs ran a 4.27 and had a 42-inch vertical. I mean, absolutely outrageous numbers. If you Google Henry Ruggs high school basketball, you'll get like a mixtape of Henry Ruggs just dunking on people in disgusting fashion in high school. There's not a strong record of guys being elite fantasy players when they're under 190 pounds. In fact, over the last 5 years, Tyreek Hill is virtually the only one. I know Ruggs is close at 188. He's just, like Josh said, I think it would be an outlier for him to be a guy that a team would lean on as like a load-bearing wideout. But there's a ton of value in Tyreek Hill types in the NFL. Evan, I assume you do have Henry Ruggs as number 3 wide receiver there in this top tier.
Yeah, and I mean, the impact that I think that he can have in the NFL is that he's going to be able to change coverage with his speed, even when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. I thought that he was not a finesse deep threat. I thought that he was pretty physical when the ball was in the air and when he was going up to get it. And, I have him as the number 3. This is different from like real life and fantasy. In fantasy, I might have Justin Jefferson at the number 3 because I think he's just going to be a more productive pro, and landing spots are going to go into this question. But I think that Henry Ruggs in real life football is going to have a lot of value on the football field. I mean, we've seen guys like Deshaun Jackson, Will Fuller, even when they're not getting the ball, they elevate the yards per pass attempt of their quarterback when they're on the field. And I think that Henry Ruggs can be like that.
I mean, look at what Hollywood Brown did for the first 4 or 5 games last season, until we kind of got slowed by injury, so on and so forth. Like, he was a ludicrous impact to what the Ravens didn't have on the field with anyone else. And Ruggs immediately comes in and offers that upside. So,
in Evan's mock draft, which of course doesn't project fantasy or does not project who Evan thinks is the best player, just where he thinks they'll land. Evan's first version of the mock draft, which is up on the site right now, he has Oakland Raiders taking Henry Ruggs at 12, San Francisco 49ers taking Jerry Jeudy at 13, Denver Broncos taking CeeDee Lamb at 15. Okay, let's talk about this next tier here because it's thick, man, and there's a lot of guys that could end up are within the range of outcomes to end up being the best wide receiver in this class. I would say TCU's Jalen Rhaegar, Baylor's Denzel Mims we mentioned, Arizona State Brandon Ayuk, Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman. We go through a lot of these guys. I want to start with Denzel Mims, Josh, because I was fully aroused when I saw his measurables and his comparison. Friend of the show, Fantasy Mansion site, generates comparison based on a lot of different factors. The best available comp to Denzel Mims was the god himself, Chris Godwin, 6'3", 207, 4.38, 38.5 vertical, 131 broad. What is your Mims take, Josh? Tell me you are excited.
Yeah, that he's incredible. First of all, that might be the only way arousal might happen during this self-quarantine for me as I live alone. Second, I think Denzel Mims is a top 15 prospect in this class. And it's always fun now coming into this process later on for me, because I get to bypass all those draft takes from September and August and throughout the regular season that, it seems like people have to latch on to. I just get to start fresh after the Senior Bowl, and boom, here we are. Denzel Mems obviously comes out of Baylor, and it's not quite like the Baylor offense of your Kendall Wrights or your Corey Coleman's, two personal favorites in the past, where it's so simple and, athleticism trumps all. But it's also not Jerry Jeudy type route running, but that's fine, because here you have Denzel Mems at 6'2", 6'3", 207 pounds, who, Evan, I don't know if you believe in what I'm about to say and saw the same thing, but the more I watched him, the more I saw like nuance and detail to his play, especially during his routes with like hand fighting or shoulder pushes, or even like using his elbow to create separation. Like he was the alpha in basically every one-on-one scenario that he had. And those little moments to create like the sliver of separation, either on his breaks or at the catch point with little push-offs, to have that in a frame that is 6'3", 207 pounds, who's also a ludicrous athlete, shows me there's like nuance to his game along with that athletic upside. And I think Chris Godwin is a fantastic comparison.
Oh, daddy.
Okay, see, when I watched him, I thought more of that he's going to be more of a perimeter receiver than Godwin, who has really become, a 60-65% slot receiver.
Yeah,
in the NFL.
But don't you think Godwin could succeed outside too if they asked him to be that, or no?
Yeah. I mean, I think that Chris Godwin's very comparable to like Hines Ward.
Okay.
Whereas I see Denzel Mims as more of like on the Kenny Golladay, AJ Green spectrum.
I like that too. These are all great names.
Okay, good. All right, yeah. It's just those guys, they win in different areas. But yeah, I mean, it's not like they couldn't win in different areas. Actually, AJ Green, if you remember, before he got hurt in 2018, was having a terrific season. A bunch of his big plays actually came out of the slot that year before he went down. But yeah, that's how I see him on the Golladay, AJ Green spectrum. Outrageous athlete. I think he's primarily going to play on the perimeter. I have him going. What's the Vikings pick? Number 22, I want to say, in the first round. I had the Vikings taking him to replace Stephon Diggs. Of course, those guys are different players, but to be that guy that they try to spring off play action and get open deep downfield, and he's big, and as you mentioned, he can win with his just with hand fighting and with kind of nuances, and certainly with his athleticism and his size. And you saying that he's a top 15 player in the draft, I love that, because what box really does he not check?
Exactly. Like there are like, okay, one, if you line up an off coverage against him and you give him a free run, he's going to run right past you. Two, if you try to press him, we talked about him maintaining his speed through contact, so he creates separation that way. And three, if somehow a corner is able to keep up with him, then he has this ability to come down with acrobatic circus catches constantly because of his extreme athleticism and his natural size. So like those three boxes that are checked off, yes, I'm trying to buy all the stock I can into Denzel Mems.
So you have Mims wide receiver 3 in this class, and you have Ruggs wide receiver 4. Is that how you have it, Josh?
Yep, I do.
Okay. Let's move to Justin Jefferson, who Evan already mentioned. I mean, you don't see guys in college catch 111 passes for 1,540 yards and 18 touchdowns. I mean, you just don't see it. Now, we obviously have to adjust for LSU's ridiculous offense and Joe Brady scheme and all that, but Justin Jefferson was like an NFL-style slot player. 81% of his routes came out of the slot. At LSU. Evan, I assume that's where you think he plays in the NFL, and how do you think we can adjust for Justin Jefferson's production at LSU given the scheme and all that?
Yeah, he goes to the combine and runs 4.43, so it's like he's got the size and the speed theoretically to win outside, but man, he's so good inside that, I mean, I think that you can, use him as like a movement, Z receiver, but I think you want to stick with them in the slot as being just a huge part of his role. And I compared him to like a discount Michael Thomas, who gets a ton of he actually lines up on the outside primarily, but he gets so much of his production in the slot because whenever he goes into the slot, like they're throwing to Michael Thomas whenever he's in the slot because he's just a mismatch creator. And Justin Jefferson's not quite as big as Michael Thomas, and I don't think he's going to be as good as Michael Thomas, but I think that you can use him in a similar fashion. He did create a lot of big plays. He was incredible in contested situations, 92% conversion rate on contested catches. That led the nation according to PFF this past season. Kevin Cole of Pro Football Focus has done studies to show that really what is the most predictive trait for wide receivers going from college to the pros, and it's production. It's not athleticism. Athleticism is very secondary. The number one thing you want to look for at the wide receiver position when trying to project a wide receiver from college to the pros is production, and Justin Jefferson has more of that than anybody in this class.
I also saw some like Adam Thielen to his game, if we're talking like outside to inside players, and maybe do their best work on the inside as well. Yeah, I don't know. I've kind of been out because I think slot receivers are easy evaluations at the college level, and then like not plug and play necessarily, but your types of Cole Beasley to Jamison Crowder to Randall Cobb, like they can find production at the NFL level. But I think Justin Jefferson is on a tier above that. Right? Because not only does he haul in the production that is created for him because of the open space that teams can create in the slot, but he also creates on his own. Like Evan mentioned, the 92% contested catch. He also forced 25 missed tackles last season. So these are plays that are kind of going above and beyond what Justin Jefferson was asked to do or what a normal player might bring to that role. And because of that, yeah, exactly what Evan's is saying. I think that style certainly does translate to the NFL level. And I would be surprised if, any team has him outside of their top 5 wide receivers, because he's the type I think that fits basically any system.
I want to bring up T. Higgins because we didn't see T. Higgins compete at the combine. We did see him at Clemson's pro day. And obviously, pro day times are going to be faster. It was a little concerning. I thought that T. Higgins only ran 4.54 at the combine. I don't know if you guys at his pro day, which is really probably closer to 4.6 at the combine. I don't know if you guys expected that. Also only 31-inch vertical. So the athletic test for T. Higgins was not great. Did break out at an early age at Clemson. What's your thoughts on T. Higgins, Josh? Because I think he's a bit of a polarizing prospect.
I'm concerned because what I've learned of myself as an evaluator, if I can call myself that, is I try to figure out what a player does well at the college level and if he has that capability to do that at the NFL level. So, and Evan, you probably saw the same thing with T. Higgins. It was a lot of vertical routes to win contested and to just catch the ball over, trailing defensive backs, or to catch like these big plays over the middle of the field on these vertical passes. Well, obviously is the natural size for that, but a lot of that to me is reliant on the athleticism of a player. And if he doesn't test like a good athlete, even at his pro day, and there's no cross check at the combine, then I don't know if his identity and his style fits his profile. And Evan, that would make me very uncertain in selecting him among these first round wide receivers.
Right. And, I was kind of expecting, I would say that when I watched him first, I mean, he looks like Martavis Bryant.
Yep.
He looks like Martavis Bryant, but like he doesn't have that level of athleticism, and he certainly doesn't have anything close to that level of speed. So I was thinking maybe Chris Henry. You remember the old Bengals?
Of course.
Oh yeah.
But I don't think he's just as good as Chris Henry was. So I do think he's a difficult evaluation. And I also think that he is going to go on day 2. And I don't know. I feel like his stock has fallen. Like he was a guy that a lot of people were projecting as like a lock first round pick. And as we become more familiar maybe with what the NFL is thinking, we realize that this guy is maybe going to be like a fringe second or third round pick. And that is going to affect his opportunities and affect his evaluation as well. Because, we can talk for, all we want about, our belief regarding talent about these players, but they're going to get more opportunities when they go higher in the draft, and they're going to get fewer when they go lower. and the expectations will be lower, and he'll be lower on the depth chart, probably for a team that takes him in the second or third round than he would had he gone in the first, which was the belief, I think, coming out of the college season.
Evan, if we're talking about these, quote, athletic, or that's how they win is athleticism, 6'3" plus wide receivers, how would you feel if I said I would take or would consider taking someone like Chase Claypool ahead of T. Higgins? Because in their style of games, I think the area of where they win is quite similar. Yet we have this confirmed stud athlete in Chase Claypool who was used in that way, like these jump ball, end zone, red zone throws, along with, these drag routes with 3 or 4 verts around him, and then asking him to get up to speed and catch a pass and then run contested because he's a train that is difficult for a smaller defensive backs to slow down. How would you fit in that discussion if you were an NFL team?
Tight end Chase Claypool?
You think he's a tight end?
No.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people said that initially. I never understood that. I mean, the guy's a wide receiver. He's a big wide receiver. Not every big wide receiver, and he won on the outside.
Yep.
On the outside at Notre Dame. He was a perimeter receiver at Notre Dame. Now all of a sudden you want to really change his position. I mean, you want to turn him into a slot player. I'm sure he could excel. He excelled in multiple roles at Notre Dame. He was an incredible special teams player, like a freaking gunner on the punt team and the kickoff team. And all of a sudden, we have to change him into a tight end like that. Make him pack on weight like that never made sense to me. And I think he's Vincent Jackson, and he's not Eric Ebron.
Love it. Obviously, one of Evan's guys in Notre Dame there, Chase Claypool. We'll get to another one of Evan's guys in Notre Dame when we get to the tight ends. I did want to go back up to the first round because both Jalen Rhaegar, I think, and Brandon Ayuk are tentatively projected to go in the first round. Josh, how would you compare and contrast those guys? And do you think that Brandon Ayuk's stock has dropped at all based on this core muscle surgery, which, I don't know, guys seem to recover from that in season in 6 weeks. So I'm not too worried about it, but maybe NFL teams are.
Yeah, probably not. I don't know. I mean, who the hell knows about anything during this draft process of what's impacting, what's not, what information teams have, what don't. This is just Wild West for an unknown bits of information that we are getting or not getting in this draft class. Quick, can I focus on Rhaegar first? Because it's a fascinating case. His athletic profile, if you just looked at a web chart, if you wanted to, is very similar to that of DK Metcalfe's in that he has a tremendous straight line explosion, both as a runner and also in his jumps. Yet his agilities were verging on terrible. Okay. Now there's a main difference between Jalen Rhaegar and DK Metcalfe. In fact, there's a couple. One is 3 or 4 inches in height and about 30 pounds of a weight difference. Mm-hmm. And so just watching DK Metcalfe's rookie season, in those first 6 weeks again, he was asked to win basically as just a supreme athlete above everyone else. There were these jump ball scenarios, slot fades near the red zone. And so I'm not sure if Jalen Rhaegar is going to be able to offer that same immediate skill set that DK did. Along with that, DK was very isolated during his time at Ole Miss. He lined up on the left side, was asked to run everything off a vertical plane, and Rhaegar was asked to, be used more around the formation. Now, he certainly wasn't used frequently enough in the slot, but they definitely manufactured more touches for him at TCU than they did for DK Metcalfe at Ole Miss. But I do wonder, in the same vein of a player, if a team has to have a plan for Jalen Rhaegar to succeed more so than they might for other wide receivers in this group.
Evan, what was your thoughts on Rhaegar and then also on Brandon Ayuk?
Very similar on Rhaegar. That really stands out as the how his profile just on paper was that of a very straight line athlete. But I when I watched him play, I didn't really think that stood out. But he's a smaller guy. It would stand out for a guy like DK Metcalfe more than Jalen Rhaegar. I don't know where Jalen Rhaegar is going to land in the draft. I mean, I put him to the Eagles at, I believe, in the early 20s. I think it was 21 overall. in my latest mock draft, but I don't really like that. I think that he could actually be available at the Eagles' second-round pick, potentially. And then Ayuk was a guy that, like, I really stood out to me. I mean, you know, you want to talk about a guy who's like Chris Godwin. I think it's Brandon Ayuk. I think, he's built very similarly. I think that their games are very similar. And, there was a lot of buzz on Brandon Ayuk going in the first round. But, you mentioned the sports hernia surgery really should not be a big deal. But in this time where, teams cannot get their hands on Brandon Ayuk, I think that could affect where he's going to go in the draft, even if it's just by, 10 or 15 spots. I mean, especially at such a deep position. Like, teams know that they can get good receivers in this draft, right? So why are you, if you have a similar grade on a wide receiver on Brandon Ayuk as you do, on Jalen Rhaegar or Denzel Mims or something, you opt for the wide receiver who doesn't have any health complications.
Going back to Rhaegar here for a second, Evan, isn't it just like almost dependent on where he lands? There's a drastic difference on if he goes to a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Where, they're going to manufacture touches for him. They're going to get in the ball in his hands. He's going to get to run in a straight line. Fantastic. Versus, I don't know, if he landed with theoretically like the Titans, who, they basically ask their guys to line up and then win on their own. And hopefully the ball goes in their direction. Like, there's no exact real plan compared to other teams. That's what's going to be a major determining factor for me.
Yeah, and I also think that if we're just comparing those two, Brandon Ayuk and Jalen Rhaegar, I think that Brandon Ayuk would have a better chance of being like a focal point receiver in his offense with Jalen Rhaegar, who I think is going to be a complementary receiver in the NFL.
All right, let's talk about some of these guys projected to go day 2 and day 3, because now we're starting to talk about how deep this class is. We've already talked about, 6, 7, 8 guys who have first-round talent. I think you can poke some holes in KJ Hamler because he's only 5'9", 178, but I don't watch a lot of college football. I do watch Penn State as a Penn State grad, and man, KJ Hamler looks so fast out there. It's wild how fast KJ Hamler looked. That said, guys who are 5'9", 178 scare me. That said, he's going to go 2 or 3 rounds later than someone like Henry Ruggs. Can we get something similar? Could this be a poor man's Henry Ruggs, Josh, and KJ Hamler?
Yeah. I mean, look at where we thought Metcalfe Hardman might go in last year's draft and look at where he went. In fact, just, let's send KJ Hamler to the Chiefs on day 2 and let's all party. Like, let's just have more track athletes, take out what Sammy Watkins has left, insert KJ Hamler, have Hamler, Tyreek Hill, and Metcalfe Hardman all in the field at the same time, an offensive line that gives Patrick Mahomes 3.2 seconds to throw the ball, and try to keep up with that speed. You can't do it. That would just be so much fun to watch every Sunday. So,
love it. Another guy that's going later here, Evan, or I don't know. Actually, I don't know where this guy's going to go. Laviska Shenault. Yeah. I've seen people call him the best athlete in the draft. He didn't test.
We don't know. That's the thing.
He had an injury. He ran 4.58, but people are saying maybe due to the injury, right, Josh? I mean, I don't know. I've seen Sammy Watkins comps on him, but I've seen people say that just by watching him on film that he looks like the best athlete. I don't know if that's true or not.
Evan, when I watched Shenault, and again, this is me coming in super late to the process. I think people loved him prior to the season and just haven't moved off of it, or maybe they're just right and I'm wrong. I saw Tennessee Cordero Patterson.
Yes,
and
exactly.
And that is a little frightening. That's not to say like he's going to have the same career as CPAT, because I'm sure tons of factors entered the equation for CPAT to not develop as a wide receiver. In an alternate universe, he might be the best wide receiver in the NFL. But with Shenault, everything is reliant on this athleticism. There's no nuance to his game. There's no detail. There's none of that. And so for us to have that evaluation and then no athletic profile in a player, that would be frightening to me in drafting in just 9 days.
Yeah, 6'1", 227. He was really like a gadget player at Colorado. 10 career receiving touchdowns, 7 rushing touchdowns, 1 on a punt return. Didn't play a whole lot in college. And but we know what he has from a size and athleticism standpoint. I know that he didn't test, but I think we know that he's a really good athlete. I feel confident saying that. So but I don't know where he's going to go. in the draft. Is he going to be any kind of a factor in year one for his offense? I think that's fair to question. No offseason workouts, no time really to, jam him into the offense and, dial up a part of the playbook to involve Laviska Shenault. So I think he's probably like a 3rd round pick.
Okay. Let's just have the Vikings take him in round 1 like they did with CPAT, since they have 2 first-round picks again this year.
Same GM still, right? Spielman was there then.
Same GM.
I could see like somebody's like Zoom freezing and like, the Vikings missing their pick again or something like that. That'll be good stuff. I want to talk about some late round kind of flyer guys, because as deep as this class is, there's guys that tested incredibly well. Like Gabriel Davis tested incredibly well. Antonio Gandy Golden tested incredibly well. I know our Pat Carane likes Brian Edwards a decent amount, and Tyler Johnson. Josh, do you have a favorite sleeper in this class? Maybe somebody projected to go on day 3 that you really, really like.
Maybe not day 3. Some people might have thought he should go there early on in the draft, or in the draft process. But now I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 2nd round pick, and that's Antonio Gibson out of Memphis. And a lot of draft sites, he's listed as a running back, despite being like 6'1" and 220 something pounds, and spent 70% of his time at wide receiver. Go back and watch that. I think it was the SMU game. He's using the slot more than anything. And I saw some real detail to his play. Like, there's plenty of times where he's crossing the formation and the ball is thrown far outside of his frame. And while working in one direction, he's able to throw his back shoulder back and adjust to the football. And as soon as he lands on the ground, boom, he's getting up the field. Like, if a team is trying to find, and this is a tough thing to mirror and replicate, but their own Deebo Samuel outside of round 1 this year, I might put my chips in Antonio Gibson's ability, because he's also someone who is just a menace after the catch and is the hammer in that area. And again, I think I saw enough Evan for me to really like his ability as a wide receiver immediately.
Yeah, we talked about him on the Mike Renner show among the running backs, but I know for sure that most teams grade him as a wide receiver.
They should.
I've listened to podcasts with you, Josh, talking about it, and you consider him a wide receiver as well.
I do. He just spent most of his time there, and he did good work there. So I don't understand trying to project him to another position. Now, he could be getting the ball in a variety of different places, like he could be winning on jet sweeps. He could be using the backfield, so on and so forth. So I don't think, he's solely just a receiver, but if we're looking at position of where he's drafting, who's going to practice and do all that kind of stuff, yes, that does make the most sense to me.
Evan, anybody on day 3 that you really like or that you're looking forward to seeing where they land?
Well, I do like Tyler Johnson, and he's a guy that had the production and doesn't necessarily have the athleticism, but he was extremely productive in the Big Ten. I think he just looks a lot like Miles Austin. Remember Miles Austin, the Dallas Cowboys, when you watch him play. I think his hands are a little bit less consistent, but I think that he's going to go late enough that, and he can play that big slot role. And that's a lot of what Miles Austin did when he was with Dallas. So I think that he's interesting. The one guy that we did not talk about we didn't even mention his name, is Michael Pittman out of USC.
Yeah.
And I've seen like Mike Evans comparisons, and I don't see that. I don't see that vertical game. But man, he is really, really interesting. He caught everything. 5 career drops on 100 or on 254 career targets. He's 6'4", 223, ran 4.52, 86th percentile athlete, sub 7 second, 3-cone. I did not see the vertical game from him, but I did see him get a lot of separation in the short and intermediate regions. And I don't know. I wanted to hear Josh kind of rap about Michael Pittman.
Yeah, he did have 12 receptions on 22 targets and 20-plus yard throws last year. 5 touchdowns, actually, in that area. Michael Pittman is obviously the son of Michael Pittman, who one of the best bodies, namely biceps, we've seen at the running back position in the NFL. I will say, this draft process, just going back to Tyler Johnson too, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, and you might have looked into this, like there was no Senior Bowl, there was no Shrine Game, there was no Combine. So like in a process that has very little information, who knows what teams are thinking of Tyler Johnson right now. On the other hand, they might want to invest in a player like Michael Pittman, who has NFL bloodlines. I guarantee you, every team that drafts him, the scout or evaluator that is trying to get him drafted their team says that in his spiel, like pounds the table.
The cocoon. He says he's part of the cocoon. Let's draft him.
Exactly. I liked him a lot. Now, do I like him more than those top three that I mentioned? No, but would it surprise me that if he is, the fourth or fifth or whatever best wide receiver ultimate in this draft class? Absolutely not. I think after that top three of Judy, Lamb, and Mems in some order, this class is going to surprise with who is the best performer after that.
Okay. Let's move on to, and by the way, if you guys want more on wide receivers, Karain did just an incredible job with doing like 2,000 word pieces on his favorite sleeper wide receivers in this draft. Would recommend checking that out before the 23rd. Let's move to tight ends. Last year I thought was a really good class for tight ends. I mean, Hawkinson, Noah Fant, Irv Smith, Sternberger, Dawson Knox, they all went in the first 3 rounds. And also some other guys who we haven't really seen yet, like Josh Oliver, Cale Waring. I don't think any tight end in this class is expected to go in the first round. I know Peter King mentioned in his article today that the Patriots might have some interest in Cole Kmet, but he's like the only one that I think has a chance. I saw under a half tight end to go in the first round is like minus 1,400 now, which is pretty absurd. So anyways, Evan, I'm curious what you think of this tight end class as a whole. It seems just incredibly weak, and we know we got to talk about your Notre Dame guy, Cole Kmet.
No, it seems awful. I think there are a couple of interesting guys. Like I took sight unseen Adam Troutman out of Dayton in a dynasty rookie draft in like the 5th round recently because, he was super productive at Dayton, which of course is, not great competition there. But he's got plus size. He's a plus athlete, 67th percentile athlete. He was a dominant producer in what Dayton's D1AA, which is now called the FCS.
Right.
So, Adam Troutman, I think is interesting in that kind of first tier. Cole Kmet, watched him at Notre Dame, always liked him. But, I think he's, he never really stood out. I mean, Chase Claypool was the guy who really stood out when everyone was healthy at Notre Dame. Cole Kmet, I think it sounds like he's going to be like a fringe 2nd or 3rd round pick and might be the first guy off the board. And then Albert O out of Missouri, who I have not watched yet. Albert, can you say his name?
No, just try it, Evan. No, I want to hear you try it.
No, I just call him Albert O. He ran 4.49, and so that put him on the radar. And then Hunter Bryant out of Washington, pretty good athlete, blew up this past season in terms of production. I mean, 52 catches, 825 yards. That's big time for any college tight end, average almost 16 yards per reception, not a blocker at all. But those are the top 4 guys as far as I see.
Evan, big picture question here. Yeah. And I know you can find some that are successful, but overall, is it worth it now for NFL teams to draft tight ends in the first 2 rounds anymore?
Yeah, I think that's definitely an exception to the rule. You have to be an exception to the rule player.
Right. But we've seen those types too, right? Like we've seen your TJ Hawkinsons, your OJ Howards, your so on and so forth, like can't miss perfect evaluations basically. That so much goes into the tight end position, right? Like you're basically learning to be an offensive lineman and a receiver, that it just seems like one, offensive coordinators have a difficult time incorporating them on a consistent basis. And 2, the transition is just uber difficult, even from, the most pro style offenses in college football, that the transition to me, it's not worth it to take one in the top 2 rounds. Like I would much rather
almost punting year 1.
Exactly. So I would much rather look for athletic upside in round 3 and beyond, or more important than anything, like have the NFL already evaluate these players for me. Trade late rounders or mid rounders for players that have done okay in their first 2 or 3 years, but there's already NFL tape out there on them, or just invest second contracts in these players that were drafted much earlier on by another team and they don't want to re-sign them to that high cap figure.
Yeah, it makes sense. A lot of tight ends I'm more interested in on their second contract than their first. And you actually saw the Falcons do exactly what you just said. They traded, I forgot what they traded. They gave up some second round pick for Hayden Hurst. Yeah. So, and I'm optimistic on Hayden Hurst's outlook this year, for sure. We didn't mention Randy Moss's son. I think out of respect to Randy, at least, Thaddeus Moss was invited to the virtual green room, and it caught my eye because,
really?
Yeah, and I didn't think that he was. I don't know. From everything that I've read, it didn't seem like Thaddeus Moss was in play to go in the first 2 rounds or whatever.
No, but he's going to be waiting for a very long time.
Yeah, so he's going to be like on the Zoom call, just like sitting by himself. I assume he's on the call because they want to talk about Randy Moss's son, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, he has good ball skills, and I think actually this might surprise you. His best trait might be his blocking. He's not this dynamic athlete, which, I mean, how tough that must be.
Yeah.
You know, like same thing as like Michael Jordan's sons, right? These you just have to live up to possibly the best player ever at a certain position. And then you're just not blessed with like, well, he does have the size. He's 6'3", 249-ish, but you just don't have the same movement or capabilities naturally as your parent, yet you are still trying to make it in the same line of work.
Yeah.
I think Thaddeus Moss is much closer to a round 6 or 7 selection than he is a round 1 selection.
Yeah. Just a general question. Do you think that, like, I don't know, somebody like Jay Sternberger or Josh Oliver would be the number 1 tight end in this class? Is that how weak this class is, that a guy who went in the 3rd round last year would actually be the number 1 tight end in this class?
I don't know. It's, you know, it does get me excited. We just mentioned you're basically punting year 1. Like, let's say the Broncos don't add another wide receiver in the 1st or 2nd round this year. Like, I am so excited to draft Noah Fant, you know, despite all the mistakes that he made as a rookie, there's enough upside that you can like hang your hat on. Again, I care more about like round 3+ wide receivers that are athletes that might be able to make it, like Devin Asiasi coming out of UCLA, who's 6'3", 280, but also has like fluid down the seam and works in line. And there's this guy named Dalton Keene, who is out of Virginia Tech, who like reminds me of Chase Cooley. Now, or Chris Cooley, excuse me, who, you know, is probably not going to work immediately in the NFL. And, you know, I think it's easy to fall in love with the evaluations of those move H-back college receivers because they're just kind of manufactured touches. But yeah, I mean, look, I don't know if a lot of people saw George Kittle coming, but when you look back at his profile, there is a reason why that succeeded, right? Because he was just this ludicrous athlete who was already going to get in the field in a certain way and then was great after the catch. I just don't know.
And every time he caught the ball, he scored a touchdown. His touchdown.
Yeah. So I'm just not 30%. Sure that we even have someone that I can even have that pull to this year. So
cool. All right. We're spending enough time on tight ends. I think we all have a good feel for the wide receiver position now. Very much looking forward to the draft, basically because, I mean, I haven't watched sports in so long and quite frankly, haven't bet on sports in so long. So I'm looking to get some draft props out there as well. Josh, we appreciate your time, brother. Tell the people where they can find you. I highly recommend Josh's podcast, his Twitter, etc. Tell the people where they can find everything.
The Rotoworld Football Podcast, you can go and check it out. It posts every Tuesday and Thursday right now. Actually, this week, we will be hosting a mock draft with myself, Paul Burmeister, who's just an incredible human being, one of the best hosts in the business, Chris Sims, who you all know quite well, and Hayden Winks. So we kind of have, you know, 2 former quarterbacks and then 2 schmoes who love to sit in their mom's basement with me and Hayden trying to all draft together. So we'll be going through the entire first round in podcast form. So be on the lookout for that. Also, we're still doing our Evan Team Needs and 7-round mock draft series. I'm sure you missed that considerably, but that is halfway through right now. We finished the AFC last week and finishing up the NFC this week. So again, that's Team Needs for every single club, plus a 7-round mock for each.
I don't miss that Team Needs series, but I know I'm gonna miss our mock draft podcast. Which
yeah, dude, that was always so much fun
every year. You got a lot to live up to, Adam. Live up to.
All right, sounds good. Josh, we appreciate the time. You guys can follow Josh. I believe it's just at Josh Norris, correct, Josh?
That is it, at Adam Levitan.
Yes, at Josh Norris, at Adam Levitan, at Evan. So you can tell that all of us were on Twitter early. We all got our official names with no problems. All right. For Josh, for producer Luke, for Evan, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.